Hi, ArcfieldWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Tuesday morning, November 29th. A lot going on in the world of weather, a lot to talk about this morning. Really two big stories I'm focused in on here. First of all, in the short term, we have a severe weather threat today in the lower Mississippi Valley, the Tennessee Valley. Not only the threat of some severe thunderstorm activity, but even isolated tornadoes are a possibility as a very strong cold frontal system associated with a very powerful low-level jet will slide across that part of the nation tomorrow and then into the eastern states on Wednesday. It looks like on Wednesday there can be wind gusts of up to 50 miles per hour or so in D.C., Philadelphia, New York City, and certainly at the coastal sections of the Mid-Atlantic region and northeastern part of the nation. 50-mile-per-hour wind gusts are likely to take place later tomorrow into tomorrow night from that same potent cold front that will produce a severe weather threat later today. Again, in the Tennessee Valley and the lower Mississippi Valley, probably with a focus area on Mississippi, but all those surrounding states from Louisiana to Arkansas, eastward to Alabama, especially western Alabama, will be in the severe weather threat later today. Longer term, still, many signs point to a colder than normal weather pattern for much of the nation as we go through the month of December. It'll initially get underway in the central and western states, eventually making its way into the eastern part of the nation, probably on a more sustained basis after December 7th or 8th or so. And we'll talk a little bit about that prospect up front here in the video discussion, and then later on we'll focus in on the short term, the near term severe weather threat with that potent cold front. First of all, we've talked at length about teleconnection indices such as the North Atlantic Oscillation, the Arctic Oscillation, others as well, the Madden-Julian Oscillation, and all of these teleconnection indices point to a colder weather pattern for the month of December for much of the United States and Europe as well, by the way. We've kind of favored the possibility of frequent high latitude blocking events in our winter outlook, partly as a result of what happened with the volcanic eruption earlier in the year in the southern hemisphere. Actually, historically has shown to have an impact on the northern hemisphere winter, the subsequent northern hemisphere winter, and part of that historical analog analysis showed a high frequency of high latitude blocking events, and boy, do we have one setting up for the month of December with a very impressive signal from the North Atlantic Oscillation. Again, the North Atlantic Oscillation and the Arctic Oscillation give us an idea as to the temperature, pressure, wind pattern in the North Atlantic Ocean, in the Arctic region, and that in turn impacts the central and eastern U.S. Now, in this particular case, it looks like the NAO, shown here, for the next couple of weeks will drop sharply into negative territory and be sustained in negative territory. The red lines right here indicate a forecast of the NAO, and again, it drops from right now near neutral or slightly in the positive zone to negative. This is December 1st. This is Thursday and goes all the way out to the middle part of December. Again, this is a signal that high latitude blocking, higher heights than normal, higher pressures than normal will form over the next week or two. Places like Greenland, Iceland, and some of the models have some very impressive high pressure readings. In fact, some of the highest surface pressure readings ever seen over the next week to 10 days or so. Places like Greenland, as much as 1080 millibars or so for surface high pressure, all associated with a blocking pattern that looks like it'll first form on the other side of the North Pole and then basically translate to Greenland, Iceland as we go through the early part of the month of December. Now, historically speaking, a negative NAO throughout the month of December results in a colder than normal nation, much of the nation, and so that's why we're focused on this particular index. Now let's take a look at its closely related cousin, the Arctic Oscillation. And here it is, the Arctic oscillation, already in negative territory. It dropped in the last few days from near neutral to slightly on the negative side, and it too will tank even deeper into negative territory over the next couple of weeks. This again goes from today's current observation to the middle part of December. So the AO and the NAO both appear to be sliding deeper into negative territory. Will hang in negative territory for a sustained period of time. And the MJO, which I'm not showing right here, goes into some colder phases for this time of the year, into phase 7 and ultimately into phase 8. So again, these teleconnection indices are signaling a colder than normal weather pattern for much of the U.S. as we go through December. Again, it looks like the sustained cold won't arrive over the next week or so into the eastern states, but probably after December 7th or 8th or so, the overall pattern will become more and more of a sustained colder than normal pattern into the eastern states. Initially, it sets up across the central part of the U.S. Well, let's take a take a look at how this translates to the 500 millibar height anomaly pattern going forward over the next week or two as we go through the early to middle part of December. This is from the ensemble run of the European model from last night, and it just shows some very impressive signals of high latitude blocking. And keep in mind that ensemble runs in general tend to smooth things out a little bit because they really have many members to the ensemble run that have slightly different initial conditions, and therefore it's kind of a smoothed out version of as many as 50 members that have slightly different initial conditions. And they also tend to smooth things out with time as climatology tends to play more and more of a role as you go deeper and deeper into the forecast. So keep that in mind as we go through this ensemble run of the European model. As we begin the Tuesday here, we have some orange showing up here in the eastern part of the nation. That's higher heights than normal, generally associated with higher temperatures than normal, although today in the mid-Atlantic region will certainly be at best normal, maybe slightly below normal. But notice over the other side of the pole, the North Pole is right in this region right here. There is some high latitude blocking already, again, just on the other side of the North Pole. Now watch what happens as we move forward here in time, and I'll do this rather quickly. We have kind of a translation of this high latitude blocking onto this side of the pole, and here's Greenland, by the way. This is Greenland and Iceland right here. So we just keep moving forward here, and the high pressure ridging, the higher heights than normal, kind of starts to shift in its core location onto this side of the North Pole. Here we are. Let's check out the time here. This is all the way into December 6th. Look at this setting up over Greenland and Iceland. We have the high latitude blocking here in about a week's time, setting up over Greenland and Iceland. Also, strong ridging over Alaska at this time. Now let's keep moving forward. And this is just a quite impressive signal here for a negative NAO. And we talked at length about this in our winter outlook, and if you want to review that, go to the homepage of arcfieldweather.com. The upper right, click on Outlooks and go to Seasonal Outlooks, and we focused in on the likelihood of high latitude blocking events this winter, partly as a result, again, of that volcanic eruption in the South Pacific early this year. Let's move forward here and watch what else happens. Just by having a high latitude blocking situation over Greenland doesn't guarantee cold weather, colder than normal weather in the east. You also have to have other factors setting up as well. But here is kind of a piece of the polar vortex breaking off into south central Canada. Notice its orientation a little bit northwest to southeast, and that increases the chance for colder weather in the Great Lakes and even the northeastern part of the nation. And we go forward here, and notice this is kind of sitting and spinning over Greenland, and that's what we mean by blocking. It tends to be a slow mover, if not a stationary type of event. But this is what's very interesting here if you live in the Mid-Atlantic region, the Northeast U.S. Let's see what timetable we're talking about. Here we are now, December 9th. Notice the upper level troughing kind of retrogrades from over the Atlantic Ocean back westward into the Mid-Atlantic region, the Northeast U.S. It kind of combines with that upper level low over south central Canada, and here we are. Very interesting weather pattern here shaping up. We'll go even farther in time and watch again this upper level low start to focus in over the western Atlantic, but then it tends to retrograde back to the west here, right here, and now we're all the way out into about December 13th. We're in the middle part of December. Remember how I talked about how these ensemble runs tend to kind of smooth things out as you go forward in time. This is way out there now, a couple weeks away, so we're not seeing the purples right now. That's not necessarily because it's weakening. It's just the climatology is playing more of a role here, so it tends to smooth things out. Still, very strong signal all the way into the middle part of December for high latitude blocking. That's higher pressures, higher heights compared to normal over Greenland, northeastern Canada. That in turn increases the chance for cold air masses to make their way from Canada into the central and eastern U.S. And when you have upper level troughiness like this starting to retrograde back in the Mid-Atlantic region, northeast U.S., watch out. This is a very interesting look to the weather pattern, let's say from December 7th all the way to December 13th, 14th or so. Become very interesting in the eastern part of the nation. Well, let's now focus on the near term. Again, we have a severe weather threat today, unusual for this time of the year, but nonetheless, we have a severe weather threat to include the possibility of isolated tornadoes down across the lower Mississippi Valley region into the Tennessee Valley, focus area Mississippi, but surrounding states, Louisiana, Arkansas, Alabama, even in the southwestern part of Tennessee. Watch out for the possibility of severe thunderstorms later today into tonight, and that includes damaging wind gusts as a possibility, large hail, and isolated tornadoes. Here is a look at the low-level jet. It's what we call a low-level jet at about a couple thousand feet off the ground, 850 millibar level. This is from the high-resolution NAM model. I wanted to take a look at the high-resolution model. It tends to have a better handle this close in time to such mesoscale or small-scale features as a low-level jet. Very, very impressive. Low pressure as we begin the day here on Tuesday. That will intensify as it pushes to the north and east. This low-level jet will remain intact and intensify as well. That sets up the severe weather area right in here. Again, Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, all the way into Alabama and even western Tennessee. Now let's move forward on an hourly basis with this particular forecast model. And after this, we'll take a look at the radar reflectivities. Here we go with that low-level jet moving up to the north and east into the latter part of the afternoon. And again, this is the time period right here where there'll be a lot of upward motion. Lower Mississippi Valley, the Tennessee Valley, especially the western half of the Tennessee Valley, leading to the possibility of severe storms. Then we get into the overnight hours. That low-level jet translates to the east, again, all associated with a very strong surface cold frontal system. Here we are into early Wednesday morning. Kind of see the location of the surface front right here, delineation between the very strong winds on the front side of that cold front, and still strong, but not quite as strong behind the frontal system. And then that low-level jet just tends to intensify here. We see lots of purple showing up. That's 64 knots and higher just above the surface. So any kind of mixing in a heavy shower, maybe even a rumble of thunder can bring some of those very high winds from a couple thousand feet down to the surface level. I expect 50-mile-per-hour wind gusts later tomorrow into tomorrow night, places like D.C., Philadelphia, New York City, and 50 to 55 miles per hour, quite likely in coastal sections of New Jersey, Delmarva Peninsula, all the way up to Long Island, for example. The western Atlantic water temperatures are above normal. That increases the low-level instability, so it certainly can increase the possibility of some 50 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts at the coast. later tomorrow into tomorrow night. Here we are now late in the day tomorrow, and the front kind of clears the coast tomorrow evening, and so will that low-level jet. It will start to shift, but you certainly can have damaging wind gusts all the way up into the eastern New England area into the midnight hour tomorrow night. And then on the backside on late tomorrow night and into the day on Thursday, winds will have shifted. This is the Thursday morning forecast map right here. Winds by this time will have shifted from southwest tomorrow ahead of the front to northwest immediately behind the front, and all day Thursday. They won't be quite as strong as what I expect later tomorrow into tomorrow night. Probably up to 50-mile-per-hour wind gusts later tomorrow into tomorrow night in the D.C., Philadelphia, New York City corridor, and certainly to the coast, and maybe up to 40 miles per hour or so out of the northwest on Thursday. By the way, in the hour or two immediately behind the frontal passage, with that wind shift from southwest to northwest, there can be very strong winds with a rapid rise in pressure. So expect 50-mile-per-hour wind gusts out of the southwest on the front side of the frontal system, D.C., Philadelphia, New York City, tomorrow afternoon into the early evening. And then there could be a 50-mile-per-hour wind gust immediately behind the front in that hour or two when the pressures start to rise rapidly, and that might be a northwesterly direction. So now let's take a look at the radar reflectivities, again using the high-resolution NAM model. And here we go, beginning the day on Tuesday. Some scattered showers forming already this morning over Arkansas, Louisiana. Let's move forward here. And again, this is kind of the area to watch right in this region for the possibility of strong to severe thunderstorms this afternoon into the evening. Mississippi, Arkansas, Louisiana, Alabama, Tennessee, especially the western side of Tennessee. Meanwhile, up to the north and west, accumulating snow over the upper part of the Midwest, and cold air behind that potent surface cold frontal system. Here's some thunderstorm activity by the time we get into the mid to late evening, still over the deep south, the Tennessee Valley. Watch out for the strong to severe thunderstorm threat here. Notice also a line associated with that surface cold front right here. This is by, let's say, late evening, midnight hour here. It's still strong. A line associated with that surface front. Then we get into the overnight hours. Lots of powerful storms here moving into the southeastern part of the nation in the overnight hours. And again, that low-level jet will play a role, possibility of some damaging wind gusts. Get into the early morning hours on Wednesday, and this is when some heavy showers move into the Mid-Atlantic, I-95 corridor region, maybe even a rumble of thunder or two, and an intensifying low-level jet increases the chance for wind gusts up to 50 miles per hour or so, even in the big cities tomorrow afternoon into the evening, and certainly along coastal sections from the Delmarva up to Jersey, and later on tomorrow night across New England's coastal section. Watch for 50 to even 60 mile per hour wind gusts. Here we go into the late afternoon, early evening hours on Wednesday. Cold air charging in. Skies will clear later tomorrow night after midnight. D.C., Philadelphia, even New York City by Thursday morning, turning much colder as well, and those winds will have shifted by then to a northwesterly direction. Here we go late tomorrow night into the early morning hours on Thursday, and here we go, a much colder day on tap. This is the Thursday morning forecast map. Winds will be from a northwesterly direction, gusting up to 40 miles per hour or so on Thursday. D.C., Philadelphia, New York City, and surrounding suburban areas in the Mid-Atlantic region. High temperatures tomorrow afternoon, 55 to 60 degrees in that I-95 corridor region, dropping to 40 to 45 degrees for Thursday afternoon. So a long, extended video because a lot going on both in the short term and the longer term. That's it for now. For ArcfieldWeather.com, I'm meteorologist